This is Karen with newclevelandradio.net, and it is time for the Intentionality Gurus with Candace Pollock. And I really like the theme today. The theme is Tame the Hamster Wheel. And I don't know about all of you listening, but the first of the year rolls around and so many people believe, it's the first of the year, everything's gonna be wonderful. And I'm gonna do things, in a new way, and I'm not gonna be running in circles. However, my hamster wheel has been going full blast. And over the last 24, 48 hours, I sort of have decided that, whoa, this is not where I want to be in the middle of January. So let's go ahead and talk about how I can slow down.
So it takes noticing, we always talk about how noticing is the first step, and it doesn't really take any action initially. But the idea is, I think it's an epidemic of busyness, not business, but busyness.
Right.
And we have this do-it-all mindset, especially if we're working and raising families, that kind of a thing. FOMO, I never really thought of myself as a fear of missing out person, but I have to acknowledge it's there. When I first heard it, I thought, oh, that's what's going on. In other circles, some of the other things that we talk about, Karen, it's called restless saboteur.
Hmm.
And once I started to get a handle on that, I realized, the motivations behind it can be a form of avoiding, and certainly that element of FOMO. And then overcommitting, I call it, your time eyes being bigger than your stomach, so to speak.
Right.
Bigger than the time you have available or energy. And then underestimating how long it takes to do something. I'm particularly when I'm delegating to somebody else, like, oh yeah, just do this, this, and this, and then getting a little impatient, maybe if it isn't done. And then saying, I think the biggest aha I had in terms of busyness, just noticing, was a quote that I came across was, every yes is a no to something else.
Yep.
So when you
It's true.
start paying
Yeah.
attention to what we're saying no to, actually asking that question, what do I have to say no to in order to do this? It was making things a little bit easier. I had a friend who had shared with me years ago that if it's not a complete yes, it's a no. And that one was useful, but it didn't have the impact of, what do I have to say no to in order to say yes to this thing? So what resonates for you so far?
Well, it's funny because probably up until the last year or so, um, I was saying yes to just about everything because I was trying to prove to myself that I could do things, whatever it was. Somebody would say, I need somebody to figure out what size planter we need for this plant. And I would be like, oh, I'll do it. I'll do it. And it was like, not something I was interested in, but okay, I did it. And maybe I gained brownie points. But really, in the last couple of years, what I'm determining is that I don't have to prove to other people what I can do. If they don't see my value in connection to them, then maybe, that relationship is not that important. And so now I'm doing more of the things that make me feel good. But I do understand the comment you made that for every yes, there's a no, because we only have so many hours in a day to get things accomplished. And so you may have to either not do something and ask somebody else to do it, or just let it, stay on that list of maybe we'll do it.
Yeah, and the other part is, I recognize way after the fact, but I used to belong to an organization and I really wanted it to succeed and so on. I was on the board at one time, and we were having a big event and people were asking for volunteers for this or that. And I was saying to a lot of things, and sincerely, not from a position that I thought I could do it all, but it was just my spirit of teamwork and chiming in. And somebody else had a reaction when I said, well, I can do that. I'll do that. And I was really kind of flummoxed at the time. And she said, oh, you do everything, and said it kind of sharply to me. And nobody had ever called me out on it. And, one, I felt my intent I wasn't trying to take over. I was just, trying to do my team thing. But it did kind of plant a little seed. It's like, oh, okay, so this is not giving other people an opportunity to chime in and so on. I still struggle with that from time to time because, when you're so used to being on that hamster wheel going round, 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 slowing down seems like something's wrong here and
Right.
not enough. But that's its own little mental cycle and so on. And then when you add hijacks, when other people's issues, like when somebody doesn't have the Zoom link for the podcast right at their fingertips, it makes somebody else has to jump to it and make sure it occurs. So what kind of hijacks occur for you? Besides,
Well, lots of hijacks, to be honest. And a lot of them come by sitting down at the computer. I'll sit down here and say, I'm going to work on the website right now. And then something flashes in Facebook, or I get a ding that I have an email, and I find myself just bouncing around. I still have not figured out a way to not get hijacked when I'm on the computer. And it's caused me a lot of problems because I'll give you an example. I'm working with this podcast organization, and there's a tool that I have not been using. And by not using it, I'm not earning points to the organization, which actually come in dollars.
hmm,
I didn't realize it. I know when I first started, I got to use it for free, and I found it cumbersome. And so it was like, well, look, I don't need that. I have my calendar, I have everything else. Why am I putting it in two places? And then I've found out this week after I had a phone call that I don't have to put all my data in there, but it's my final recorded show. And that way they get filtered to various organizations. And so it's another way to get us more listeners. Had no idea. So I started doing that yesterday, but I kept getting hijacked to do something else. And my thought pattern yesterday was I was going to get 20 of our shows uploaded, and I only got 5. And that's because I allowed myself to, there's something out of the corner of my eye I can see. Oh, I better take care of that.
so applying, well, one, you noticed it, so kudos. But then applying the idea of saying yes to responding to those items, or even having those alerts on while you're doing this other
Right.
function. What does that mean you have to say no to?
Well, it has this, what I should do with that is the same thing that I do with my podcasts. Okay. I still get those, bleeps telling me that there's something, but I've learned to ignore it. And then, after the podcast, then I can go either read the email or see what the text message is. But for some reason, I have not given myself permission to do that in other ways.
I love this because, I mean, there's no way that we talk about these details going into,
Right.
but it just plays in perfectly. This is such a perfect example. So the things we're talking about today, and presumably in some future podcasts linked to this, they're based on the writing of Demir and Carrie Bentley called Winning the Week, and Laura Vanderkam's work in 168 hours. And then the work of Brian Johnson, who I've followed since, I don't know, 2014, 15. It was optimized, now it's heroic. And so the idea is to decide what your number one priority is for that day. That day, one, there can only be one priority. And so in this instance, if your overarching goal is to enhance the, your production company, your podcast production company, and everybody that participates in it, then that has that, on the days that you have your calls, your recordings, then you have to post those within a certain period of time to this entity.
Exactly.
And then that would do what for the overarching goal?
Well, I'd be achieving it. Okay. And I don't have to do it all at one time. And that's this morning when I got on the computer, I had decided that's what I was going to do. I did not look at my email this morning, did not look at Facebook. Although I looked at email towards the end of me inputting all this before your show. And
Because
I'm
you
glad I
knew that I
did
would
because
ask,
you
where is
sent
that
me an
link?
email.
But you should teach me a lesson and say, don't expect me to be checking my email.
Well, one of the things that I decided a long time ago is that right before a show, I have to check to see if there's a text message or an
Yeah.
email. And I can't tell you how many times that has saved me. So for
Mhm.
instance, somebody has misplaced the link, okay, or the link isn't working. At least I'm aware of it. But a lot of times it's somebody who's, will email me and say, I'm really sorry. I'm, in an important meeting. I'm not going to make it on time. And it's like, okay, instead of me sitting here waiting for that person to
Right.
log in and they don't log in.
Yeah. So, again, it's just a perfect example. So it's not a, absolute rigid rule, but the idea is for us to be able, and we're just using you as the guinea pig here on the hamster wheel, although I've never actually seen a guinea pig on a hamster wheel. The idea is that that's during the times that you allocated to do this posting, whatever name you give it, that's going to bring in revenue for the production company, that's going to then be able to fuel a bunch of other things.
Right.
That would be a key thing. And then that would occur at various points during the week.
Exactly. And
All right.
once I'm up on it and get my backlog, then it's going to be very routine. And
So it might take 15 minutes out of a day.
Right.
But
Exactly.
if it was a protected 15 minutes, then you could high five yourself and celebrate and say, good job, Karen. And
Right.
And that would, if you could maintain that cadence, that would have a lot of, exponential benefits to you personally and professionally.
Right.
Okay. So then the idea would be to turn off the alerts, the email alerts, do that one little check-in, because that's part of being able to do the production, but it's not the ambient checking email and the other kinds of stuff we, Facebook and so on that we tend to do.
Right.
And so the beauty of these things from Winning the Week and the 168 hours and the Brian Johnson stuff. So with Brian Johnson, it's a he's got a lot of depth with all of his material and so on. It's pick one priority per day. Now, Brian's philosophy is you take one priority, the number one thing you want to get done in 3 categories. So the first one is your energy. All right. So is it a workout? Is it, maybe meditation and so on? One for work. So basically something that's going to support, your work role. And then one in your relationships, could be with yourself, could be with your immediate family, could be for the community or, for the world. But the idea is just one per, and to be able to articulate that every day. I like that. I have some steady things that I do regularly, that it's the same thing each day. But if I maintain that, then I can maintain a lot of, mental as well as physical equilibrium. But I like that Demir and Carrie's material in Winning the Week, because when you think about it, when you look up the definition of priority, there can only be one.
Right.
All right. And so then you can have a backup, you can have a runner up, Miss America has a runner up. So you can have but if you get that one priority done, it's really going to support everything else. And the other part that I like that they do is, the Bentleys do, is they suggest you, when you're planning your next week, you look back at the prior week and you do what I call a postmortem. And you basically go back over it and say, okay, what could I have consolidated here so that I'm doing this chunk of things in this period of time? Doesn't require a lot of my energy. What can I do to eliminate it completely? Maybe automate it so that I don't have to do it anymore. That's one I struggle with because I have to delegate to other people to do those, the technology parts. And then what can I outsource to have somebody else do? So looking back on what we just talked about for you, what occurs to you if you were to look at that week?
Well, first of all, I have nobody that I can, well, I take that back.
You've got a husband who's very technologically proficient.
My first reaction was I have nobody to outsource things to, but I do. And I'm getting better at it. So I have a client who is constantly asking me to help them get a guest for their show. And so I've been doing it, but half-heartedly. It's like, this is not part of the process really that I do. You're doing the show, your show, your theme, and you should bring your own guest on. But anyways, I've been doing it, and finally, for the last month, I started noting on my calendar how much time I was devoting to it. Because maybe I was sending out emails to prospective guests, and then I had to follow through and figure out which ones, were answering, which ones weren't. And so I actually came up with it. I was putting in 15 hours a month for the one client. And so I called the client and I said, either I need to get paid for this, or you need to do it yourself. And the first comment was, well, you do such a good job. Okay, well, that means that I'm valuable and you can pay me
Then
to
that
do
means
it.
you're going to pay me a primo
Right.
price.
And then the next comment was, well, don't you want my show to be good? And it was like, well, I do. But if I'm going to go through that work, I might as well be the host of that show. And that's how I phrased it. And she said, well, but I do a good job. But just to host it is not what I'm looking for in this scenario. And she wasn't getting it. And so we've talked about this before, you can say something, hundreds of times to somebody. And if they don't want to hear it the way it's coming out, they're just going to not hear what you're talking about. So I then sent her a very detailed email, and I showed her, on this day I did this, and these are the people I contacted. And she finally called me back and she said, where do you find time to do all that?
Yeah.
So just telling her it was 15 hours meant nothing to her.
Right.
When I could document it and show it to her, and she knew that I was contacting these people because I copied her on all the emails, it was like, oh. And I said, so now you have a choice. You can get your own guests, or I'm going to come up with a fee to do this work.
Well, let me ask you about that though. So is that your best and highest use?
It's not my best and highest use, but it could be 2 or 3 on the list of what would be best for the radio station.
And can you be excellent at doing it?
If I actually section out the time and get paid for it. Because in those 15 hours that I'm giving to this person each month, I could be doing something else. And that something else might be just sitting here at my desk doing a word game. It could be, cooking, baking, whatever. So if I'm not going to get paid for those hours and it's not going to enhance things enough, then no, it's not worth it.
Well, and even if you got paid, if it's hourly, you're trading your time for money. And if there are some things you can do that can be automated and so on that are not, you're getting paid for the result, not the time.
Right.
Those things can be more profitable. And that's not a shameful thing to say. I coach a lot of small law firm owners, and they spend a lot of time focusing on bringing cash flow, but sometimes at the expense of things that are more profitable for them. And it's really hard for them to make that distinction, that we want to be able to focus on the things that make our heart sing, not just what we can do. I mean, yeah, I'm preaching to myself here, because somebody's got to do it, somebody's got to help them. And I'm running around and working on things that they shouldn't have been on our menu. All right.
Right.
Yes, I can do it, but we don't really have the workflows to support it. And then it's all based on me. I can't delegate it or automate it, which means I can't be everything to everybody. And I'm projecting that I'm hearing all of that from you. And I don't know how you hear me.
Yeah, I mean, now that you're saying it, it makes sense, because trading myself for dollars, yeah, in some ways it feels good, that's more in the bucket. But it also, I feel sometimes I'm cheating the rest of my podcasters.
Exactly. So
Yeah.
whether that's true or not, but it's just noticing, just saying, okay, anchoring to the 168 hours, we all have 168 hours, 24/7 in a week. And when we, subtract out how much time we sleep, how much time it takes for food prep and eating and, acquisition of food, going to the grocery store, and what, other activities, our working out activities, if we have those or not. And then at work, what do we do in those times, and so on. And inevitably, I just took somebody through that exercise yesterday, and he discovered that he had an extra 37 hours in the week that were not allocated to all of these things. And they were just kind of amorphously getting absorbed by work. He wasn't leaving at a regular time, and
Right.
kind of intruding on the time he would otherwise be reading to his daughter, their first younger child, kind of a deal. So in this instance, the making the distinction between I can do it and I so-called should do it, with air quotes around it, might be useful, because in terms of what the business can do and be excellent at. In Good to Great, Jim Collins said the difference that he analyzed businesses, and they were all top-notch businesses and so on, but some were really great businesses. And he said the thing that made the good businesses great, that distinction, where they had a real clear sense of what their passion was with the work they were doing, what they could be excellent at or were excellent at. And then what is their economic driver, their profit per X, that if they focus on X, they can be profitable. So it doesn't mean to be all things to all people.
Right.
All right. So when I put all of those words out there, what stands out to you?
Well, first of all, what it really came to mind is those 15 hours right now are more, I need them more for me in business and personal life.
Mhm.
It's not worth the dollars that I would get for it. And I've been thinking this for a while, and my husband even said it to me the other day. He said, "No, we were sitting in the dining room eating dinner, and both of our phones dinged at the same time. I went and looked at mine, and it was one of the people that I had reached out for this client, and um, they left me this long, long text, and I'm sitting there reading it, okay, and I'm thinking, do I really account for this? That I'm sitting here
Mm.
at dinner, okay? And it brought me to remember something that my son told me about um, on his last job, that during the working hours, the person he was working with said very, very little to him. But as soon as work was over, he was getting one text message after another. And he finally realized that he was putting in somewhere between 1 to 3 hours extra each day
Mhm, mhm.
reading the text messages and having to respond to them off of his hours.
Right.
And I remember getting appalled. And then the other night while this happened, I'm thinking to myself, I'm doing the same thing, you
And
know?
in that one, you're the appallee. You're on the receiving end of it. Yes.
Right. So there are things that hey, you don't, maybe this isn't worth your time and whatever dollar figure you give it. Um, and but it takes hearing it, but not being judged over it. And I think that's what the difference is. I felt my husband's been judging me about doing this. Um, and that's bothersome. It's like, hey, I'm a big girl, I know what I'm doing. But just in this conversation, it was, is it worth your while? Is it what you want to do? And, both answers are no. So, you
And
know,
saying yes to it is a no to these other things. And
right,
today we're talking in terms of dollars, but we could just as easily say time with family or just time on our own or time
exactly.
goofing off, watching a soap opera or something. And who's to say that that isn't the appropriate, you know, value you put on it? It's your choice. But we can be thinking in terms of our time slots, that 168 hours. I just love that her book and the TED talk that she did, because we can get really present, just noticing, don't have to do anything, no commitment, no master plan changes or anything, and just notice, I have 168 little chits. Where am I going to place them? And do the things that support you physically and mentally. Those would be the best investment. And then pick the other things. And it's kind of like spending our money. We can never, we can always get more money in essence, but we can't manufacture time. So we need to
Right.
spend wisely and stay on
Exactly.
real, or at least slow it down a bit.
Yeah. Well, and running on that hamster wheel doesn't do any of us any good.
We don't even get, points for working out.
Right. And the funny part is I wrote this blog the other day, and it was sort of about this. And I reflected that when daytimers were very prominent,
Yeah.
everybody was carrying one.
Yeah.
Um,
Big,
I
big
went out and got
colors.
one,
Yep. Me too.
and my days were so filled with
Yep.
things. And now when I look back, I think to myself, were my days filled with things because I was trying to prove to somebody else who carried a daytimer that I was as busy as them? And to be honest with you, yes, that's exactly what I was doing.
That's what you do. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
you always saw pictures of people with these big, thick day timers that were just chock-a-block with maybe with Post-it notes and so on. And it was kind of a, a badge of honor in a sense that, I'm important because I'm so busy. And
Yeah.
I haven't fully read the book Get It Done by David Allen. There's this whole concept behind it because it just required too many words and details and that kind of thing. But one of the things I really love from the Winning the Week by the Bentleys is we're not going to get it all done. Just get over that. All right.
Yeah.
Any illusions we have of getting it all done are just beating ourselves up unnecessarily. So be more mindful. Go back over the past week and say, okay, what could I have done differently to make that a more impactful week, not a busier week, not chock-a-block with all sorts of things, but how might I have done it differently, and then have that inform the current week, and just keep refining it, just noticing.
Absolutely. Well, that's part of the reason I wrote the blog this week because, um, starting off the new year, you know, being ill, um, I really did cut back tremendously.
Mhm.
Um, and when I went, it was funny because when I wrote the blog, I was sitting here looking to see what was on my calendar for the day, and it was a light day. And I went back a week and it was like, oh, I really didn't do anything last week. Oh, I didn't do anything the week before. Wow, I've really been sort of on vacation for a month. And the reality was I wasn't on vacation. I was sick, but the world didn't fall apart.
Yes.
And it's like, logically, I know that, but emotionally, it's like, I got to be on the wheel. But once I wrote the blog, that's when I, you know, really took a step back and said, you know, there are going to be some changes. And, like yesterday, knowing that I had 5 shows in a row and 5 shows that I really enjoyed doing, um, I knew that I had to take a break. And part of that break was not going to my group meeting last night, which I wanted to do, but I also wanted me time. And,
Exactly.
it was like, I'm going to do it. And my husband laughed at me because when I came down after the last podcast and said, um, I'm not doing group tonight, he looked at me and said, but you really enjoy it. I said, yeah, but I really enjoy me. And
Mhm.
there's too much going on in my head. And he goes, okay. And he said,
Perfect.
and he took me out to dinner, which was even an extra special thing. Um, but I didn't sit there looking at my phone either at dinner.
Oh, lovely.
Yeah, it was just like, I'm really in overload. And even if the two of us aren't talking, I don't care. You know, I heard sounds around me. I wasn't paying any attention to what they really were. Um, and the two of us were really quiet last night. And we both really needed it. So,
So to me, that's stepping off the hamster wheel. If
yeah,
only for a moment you allowed yourself to just, maybe you were still standing on it, but it wasn't, going around worrying.
absolutely.
Um,
Absolutely.
that's the beginning of taming it, making those kinds of decisions, saying, nope, I choose to spend this time doing X and not Y, because where's Y getting you?
Got it. Well, another great conversation today. And, um, it's in the direction that I've been wanting to go and have been trying to go. So, it'll be interesting in 2 weeks to uh, see what we've all accomplished.
Kudos, little guinea pig.
All right. Have a great day. Talk to you later.
All right, you too. Thanks.
Bye.